This discussion thread is one of the first times you're going to start experimenting with MLA style to work a quote into your narrative. So you've got your own words, and then that's going to be about 75 to 80% of the essay. The other 20 to 25% are going to be quotes from the primary source, which is the piece of literature you're writing about, or secondary sources where it's critics, other people who have written about the same piece of literature that you're analyzing. You're going to bring their ideas in to support your ideas. And there's this whole thing going on in college where we're trying to figure out ways of incorporating quotes in a graceful way, setting them up, letting the reader know that the quote is coming, and then citations or attributions, right? Attributing, excuse me, that's easy for me to say, attributing the quote in a proper way, in a parentheses after the quote, okay? So let's take a quick look at this. I don't expect you to learn MLA style from my tiny bit of instruction. You should have studied this already in English 1A, but that's where the Writing Center and the team teachers come in, because if you're not secure with your knowledge of MLA style, they can really help you on the final draft. And take the quiz on MLA style that I provided on Canvas. And if you get everything right, you probably don't need help from the Writing Center. You remember it from learning it in English 1A. But if you're missing 3 or 4 out of 10 questions, you definitely should consider working with the Writing Center and kind of shoring up your knowledge of MLA style. So here is the example on this page. And let's take a quick look at it, okay? A signal phrase sets up the quote and says, hey, look, a quote's coming. Notice that I highlighted this in blue. A citation after the quote in parentheses attributes the quote and explains where you got the quote from. So here's a quote that I have displayed. In blue is the signal phrase saying, hey, a quote's coming up in an article from the Journal of American Fiction Critique. Dr. Ethana Miller, a professor at Stanford, argues that. Notice there's a verb, argues that, okay? It could also be set up where you say, according to Dr. Ethana Miller. Notice that I do, in this signal phrase, give you some sort of indication about why this person is worthy of quoting. It's a very common error just to throw in a name and say, Dr. Miller says, and I'm looking at this going, Dr. Miller, who, from where? Why should I think that this quote is from somebody who I would value, who has some credibility? So part of the function of a signal phrase is to establish the credibility of the person you're quoting. In this situation, there's a red 17 in parentheses. That is the citation in MLA style, which implies that this is on page 17 of whatever journal or book the quote comes from. Sometimes you put the author's last name and page number in. If there isn't a page number, sometimes you just put in the last name. There's a lot of complexities to these rules, way too much for me to explain in this video. And that's why I said, if for some reason you didn't study this in high school or in English 1A, or you studied it, but you forgot much of it, you can work with the Writing Center team teachers to get your MLA style perfect for the 4 essays in this class. And I want you to succeed. I think MLA style is the one area where students suffer the most in their rubric scores, and that could drag a grade of an A paper down to a C+ or a B-. You don't want that to happen. So experiment with MLA style. Make sure that you get a good quote that supports your sub-argument in, and I'll give you some feedback after you post it on the discussion thread.